The scream pierced through the evening air like a knife cutting through silence. Kira Washington froze mid-step, her hand instinctively tightening around her 8-year-old daughter Destiny's small fingers. The sound wasn't the usual city noise of car horns or street vendors. This was different. This was pure terror. "Mama, what was that?" Destiny whispered, her dark eyes wide with concern as she looked up at her mother. Kira's heart hammered against her chest as she scanned the dimly lit street ahead. They were just 3 blocks from their apartment, walking home from Destiny's piano lesson like they did every Tuesday evening. The familiar route suddenly felt foreign and dangerous. Then she saw it. About 50 feet ahead, near the entrance to Riverside Park, a small figure was struggling against a tall man in a dark hoodie. The child couldn't have been more than 6 or 7 years old, her tiny fists beating against the man's arms as he dragged her toward a white van parked at the curb. "Let me go. Let me go," the little girl screamed, her voice cracking with fear. Kira's nursing training kicked in immediately. Her mind calculated distances, escape routes, and potential weapons in seconds. The man was bigger than her, but she had surprise on her side. More importantly, she had something he didn't: a mother's protective instinct that extended to every child she encountered. "Destiny, baby, I need you to run to Mrs. Chen's store right there and call 911, Kira said, pointing to the corner grocery store about 20 yards behind them. Her voice was calm but firm, the same tone she used in the emergency room when things got critical. "But Mama." "Now, baby. Run and don't look back." Kira didn't wait to see if Destiny obeyed. She knew her daughter would do as told. They'd practiced emergency procedures before. Instead, she kicked off her heels and broke into a run, her bare feet slapping against the cold concrete. The kidnapper was focused on getting the struggling child into the van. He didn't notice Kira approaching until she was 5 feet away. By then it was too late for him to react. Kira had played basketball in college before nursing school changed her path. She knew how to use her body as a weapon when necessary. She launched herself at the man, her fist connecting with his jaw in a punch that sent shock waves up her arm. The impact was so sudden and unexpected that he stumbled backward, loosening his grip on the little girl. The child broke free and ran toward Kira, tears streaming down her face. "Get behind me, sweetie," Kira said, positioning herself between the child and the man who was now shaking his head, trying to clear the dizziness from her punch. The kidnapper was about 6 feet tall with a scraggly beard and cold blue eyes that held no warmth or humanity. He touched his jaw where Kira had hit him, and his expression shifted from surprise to anger. "You made a big mistake, lady," he growled, taking a step toward them. Kira stood her ground, though every instinct told her to run. She couldn't leave this child, and she wouldn't abandon her principles now. "The only mistake here is yours," she said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "The police are already on their way." As if summoned by her words, the distant sound of sirens began to fill the air. The man's eyes darted between Kira, the child, and his van. He seemed to be calculating his odds. "This isn't over," he said, but he was already backing toward his vehicle. Kira memorized every detail she could: the license plate number, the scar on his left cheek, the tattoo peeking out from under his sleeve. She'd give the police everything they needed to find him. The van's engine roared to life, and within seconds the kidnapper was speeding away into the night. Only then did Kira allow herself to breathe. She knelt down to the little girl's level, her hands shaking now that the adrenaline was wearing off. The child was beautiful, with long dark hair and green eyes that seemed far too old for her young face. Her clothes were expensive: a designer coat and polished shoes that probably cost more than Kira made in a week. "Are you hurt, sweetheart?" Kira asked gently, checking the girl for injuries. The child shook her head, but tears continued to roll down her cheeks. "I was walking home from dance class and he just grabbed me," she whispered. "He said my daddy sent him, but I knew that wasn't true. Daddy always sends Parker to pick me up, and Parker drives the black car, not a white van." Kira's heart broke for this little one who was clearly well protected under normal circumstances but had somehow slipped through the cracks tonight. "What's your name, honey?" "Sophie Pierce," the girl said, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. The name meant nothing to Kira, but she filed it away for the police. "Well, Sophie, you're safe now. I'm Kira, and I'm going to stay with you until we can get you back to your family." The sirens were getting closer now, and Kira could see Destiny peering out from the safety of Mrs. Chen's store, her face pressed against the glass window. At least her own daughter was safe. "Why did you help me?" Sophie asked, her green eyes searching Kira's face. "You don't even know me." Kira smoothed the child's hair back from her face, her heart aching for what this little girl had just experienced. "Because every child deserves to be protected, sweetie." Because what's right is right, no matter who you are or where you come from. The first police car rounded the corner, its red and blue lights painting the street in alternating colors. More would follow, Kira knew. There would be questions, reports, and probably hours at the station giving statements. But as she held this trembling child who had been seconds away from disappearing forever, Kira knew she'd made the right choice. She'd acted on instinct, led by her heart rather than her head, and it had saved a life. She had no idea that her split-second decision to punch first and ask questions later would completely change her own life in ways she never could have imagined. The little girl in her arms wasn't just any child, she was Sophie Pierce, daughter of one of the city's most powerful and wealthy men. And her father, Jonathan Pierce, was about to learn that sometimes the most valuable things in life can't be bought with money. They come from the courage of strangers who choose to do what's right, even when it's dangerous. Even when it changes everything. The police station buzzed with activity even at 9 o'clock in the evening. Kira sat in Detective Rodriguez's office, holding Sophie's hand while they waited for the child's father to arrive. Destiny had been picked up by Kira's neighbor and was safely at home, but Kira's mind kept replaying the events of the past 2 hours. "Miss Washington, you did an incredibly brave thing tonight," Detective Rodriguez said, reviewing her statement one more time. "Most people would have just called the police and hoped for the best." Kira shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "I'm a nurse. I see what happens when people don't act fast enough. Sometimes you can't wait for someone else to do the right thing." Sophie hadn't left Kira's side since the incident. The little girl seemed to find comfort in her presence, which broke Kira's heart. Where was her family? Why was a child this young walking home alone from dance class in the first place? "My daddy's probably in a meeting," Sophie said quietly, as if reading Kira's thoughts. "He has lots of meetings. Parker was supposed to pick me up, but he called and said there was traffic so I should walk. It's only 4 blocks. Kira exchanged a look with Detective Rodriguez. 4 blocks might as well be 400 when you're 6 years old and there are predators waiting. The office door burst open and a tall man in an expensive suit rushed in, his dark hair disheveled and his blue eyes wild with panic. He looked like he'd run all the way from wherever he'd been. "Sophie," he breathed, dropping to his knees in front of his daughter. Sophie launched herself into his arms, and for the first time since the incident, she began to cry, not the terrified sobs from earlier, but the relieved tears of a child who finally felt completely safe. "Daddy, I was so scared," she whispered against his shoulder. "I know, baby girl. I know. I'm so sorry I wasn't there," he said, his voice thick with emotion and guilt. Kira watched the reunion with mixed feelings. Relief that Sophie was with her father, but also concern about the circumstances that had led to tonight's events. This man clearly loved his daughter, but love wasn't always enough to keep children safe. Jonathan Pierce looked up at Kira, and she was struck by how young he seemed despite the expensive clothes and obvious wealth. He couldn't have been more than 35, and the exhaustion in his eyes spoke of someone carrying too much responsibility. "You're the woman who saved my daughter," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I just did what anyone would do," Kira replied, though they both knew that wasn't true. "No," Jonathan said firmly, standing up with Sophie still in his arms. "Most people would have walked by. Most people would have convinced themselves it wasn't their business." He paused, studying her face. "Detective Rodriguez told me what happened. You risked your life for a stranger's child." Kira felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I have a daughter too. I'd hope someone would do the same for her." Something shifted in Jonathan's expression at the mention of Destiny. "You put yourself in danger, leaving your own child to help mine. My daughter was safe. Sophie wasn't." The simple honesty of her statement seemed to affect him deeply. He held Sophie a little tighter, and Kira saw his jaw clench with what looked like barely contained emotion. Detective Rodriguez cleared his throat. "Mr. Pierce, we'll need to discuss security arrangements. This wasn't a random kidnapping attempt. They knew who Sophie was, knew her routine." Jonathan nodded grimly. "I'll have my security team coordinate with you. This won't happen again." "Daddy, can Miss Kira come home with us?" Sophie asked suddenly, her small voice cutting through the adult conversation. Both Kira and Jonathan looked surprised by the request. "Sweetheart, Miss Kira has her own family to go home to," Jonathan said gently. "But I want to thank her properly," Sophie insisted with the determination that only children possess. "She saved me, Daddy. She punched the bad man." Despite everything, Kira had to smile at the girl's matter-of-fact description of events. Jonathan looked at Kira with an expression she couldn't quite read. Would you consider joining us for dinner tomorrow night? Both you and your daughter. I'd like to thank you properly, and Sophie clearly isn't ready to say goodbye yet. The invitation caught Kira off guard. She thought about her small apartment, her modest life as a single mother working double shifts at the hospital. This man lived in a completely different world from hers. "You don't need to thank me, Mr. Pierce." "Really?" "Please," he said, and there was something vulnerable in his voice that made her reconsider. "Let me do this. For Sophie if not for me." Kira looked down at the little girl, who was watching her with hopeful green eyes. How could she say no to that face? "Okay," she said finally. "Dinner sounds nice." The smile that spread across Sophie's face was brighter than all the police station's fluorescent lights combined. An hour later, after giving final statements and exchanging contact information, Kira found herself in the parking lot saying goodbye to the Pierce family. Jonathan had insisted on having his driver take her home, but she declined, preferring to take the bus as usual. "Miss Kira," Sophie called out as Kira started to walk away. "Yes, sweetie?" "Thank you for being brave." Kira knelt down and gave the little girl one more hug. "You were brave too, Sophie. You never stopped fighting." As the black limousine pulled away, Kira stood under the streetlight and wondered what she'd gotten herself into. Tomorrow she'd be having dinner with one of the city's wealthiest families, all because she'd followed her instincts and thrown a punch at a stranger. Her phone buzzed with a text from her neighbor. "Destiny's asleep. She's so proud of her mama the hero. See you tomorrow." Hero. Kira shook her head as she walked to the bus stop. She wasn't a hero. She was just a mother who'd seen a child in danger and acted accordingly. But as she rode the bus home through the city streets, she couldn't shake the feeling that tonight had been about more than just being in the right place at the right time. There had been something in Jonathan Pierce's eyes when he looked at her, gratitude, yes, but also something deeper. And Sophie's immediate attachment to her felt significant too, as if the little girl had been waiting for someone exactly like Kira to come into her life. Maybe that was just wishful thinking. Maybe tomorrow's dinner would be a polite thank you meal, and she'd never see the Pierce family again. But somehow, Kira suspected that her life had just taken a turn she never could have anticipated. The question was she brave enough to see where it led? The Pierce mansion sat behind tall iron gates in the most exclusive neighborhood in the city. As Kira and Destiny stepped out of the taxi, both mother and daughter stared up at the imposing structure with wide eyes. "Mama, it looks like a castle," Destiny whispered, clutching her mother's hand. Kira had to agree. The house was 3 stories of stone and glass, with manicured gardens that probably employed more people than worked in her entire hospital wing. She suddenly felt underdressed in her simple blue dress and Destiny's Sunday best. "Remember what we talked about?" Kira said softly to her daughter. "We're here because Sophie needs friends, not because of all this fancy stuff." Destiny nodded solemnly. At 8 years old, she was wise beyond her years, partly from necessity and partly from having a mother who'd always been honest about their circumstances. The front door opened before they could ring the bell, and Jonathan Pierce appeared, looking more relaxed than he had at the police station. He traded his business suit for dark jeans and a white button-down shirt, and the change made him seem more approachable. "Kira, I'm so glad you came," he said, his smile genuine. "And you must be Destiny." Destiny looked up at him with the serious expression she reserved for new adults. "Thank you for inviting us to your house, Mr. Pierce." "You can call me Jonathan," he said, kneeling down to her level. "And I should be thanking you for sharing your mom with us yesterday. That was very brave of her." "My mama's the bravest person I know," Destiny said with complete conviction. Kira felt her cheeks warm at the praise. "Where's Sophie?" "I brought her something." Jonathan's face lit up. "She's been watching for you from the window upstairs." "Sophie," he called toward the grand staircase in the foyer. The sound of running feet echoed through the house, and then Sophie appeared at the top of the stairs, still in her school uniform but with her hair down and her face bright with excitement. "Miss Kira." "Destiny," she called, practically flying down the stairs. Kira had brought a small stuffed elephant from the hospital gift shop, nothing expensive, but something soft and comforting for a little girl who'd been through trauma. Sophie's face when she saw it was worth more than any expensive toy. "I love him," Sophie said, hugging the elephant tight. "What's his name?" "That's up to you," Kira said. "He needs someone special to name him." "Courage," Sophie said without hesitation. "His name is Courage because he reminds me of you." The simple statement hit Kira harder than she'd expected. She glanced up to see Jonathan watching the exchange with an unreadable expression. "Girls, why don't you go play in the garden room while I show Miss Kira around?" Jonathan suggested. Sophie grabbed Destiny's hand immediately. "Come on. I want to show you my dollhouse. It's as big as a real house." As the girls ran off together, their laughter echoing through the halls, Jonathan turned to Kira with an apologetic smile. I hope you don't mind the tour. Sophie insisted I show you everything. She's been talking about you non-stop since yesterday. She's a special little girl, Kira said, following him through rooms that belonged in a magazine. How is she doing? After yesterday, I mean. Jonathan's expression grew serious. Better than I expected, honestly. Her therapist says that's partly because of you. You made her feel safe in the moment when she needed it most. They walked through a living room that could have fit Kira's entire apartment, past a dining room with a table for 12, and into a kitchen that was bigger than most restaurants. This is beautiful, Kira said, running her hand along the marble countertop. Do you cook? Jonathan laughed, but there was no humor in it. I barely know how to make coffee. We have a cook, a housekeeper, a nanny. Sophie has everything she could possibly need except. He trailed off, looking out the window toward where the girls were playing. Except a normal childhood. Except the ability to walk 4 blocks without security. Except. He paused, seeming to wrestle with something. Except a mother. The words hung in the air between them. Kira wanted to ask but didn't want to pry into what was clearly a painful subject. My wife died 2 years ago, Jonathan said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. Cancer. Sophie was only 4 when she lost her mom, and I've been trying to figure out how to be both parents ever since. I'm sorry, Kira said, and meant it. That must be incredibly difficult. The hardest part is that I can give Sophie everything money can buy, but I can't give her what she needs most: a mother's love, a woman's perspective, someone who understands what it's like to be a little girl in this world. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching through the window as Sophie showed Destiny her garden playhouse. The 2 girls were already acting like old friends. Sophie doesn't usually warm up to people this quickly, Jonathan said. She's been guarded since her mother died. But with you, it's like she's been waiting for you her whole life. Kira felt that familiar flutter in her chest, the same feeling she'd had when she first held Destiny as a newborn, like the universe had shifted to put her exactly where she needed to be. Tell me about Destiny, Jonathan said, clearly wanting to change the subject from his own pain. She's everything to me, Kira said simply. Her father left when she was 2. Said he wasn't ready for the responsibility. So it's been just the 2 of us ever since. That must be hard, raising a child alone. Kira shrugged. You do what you have to do. I work nights at the hospital, she stays with my neighbor. We don't have much, but we have each other. Jonathan studied her with an intensity that made her self-conscious. You're remarkable, you know that? I'm just a single mom doing her best. No, he said firmly. Yesterday proved you're much more than that. Most people talk about doing the right thing. You actually do it even when it costs you something. Before Kira could respond, the girls came running back into the kitchen, both breathless with excitement. Daddy, can Destiny come over every day? Sophie asked. We're going to be best friends. Can we, Mama? Destiny added, looking up at Kira with hopeful eyes. Jonathan and Kira exchanged a look over the girls' heads. There was something unspoken passing between them, an acknowledgement that this was about more than just a playdate. We'll see, baby, Kira said. Mr. Jonathan is very busy, and we can't just invite ourselves over. Actually, Jonathan said, his voice careful, I have a proposition. Kira raised an eyebrow, suddenly wary. Sophie needs a tutor for the summer, someone to help her with reading and just be a positive female influence. And after yesterday, I think we could all benefit from better security awareness. He paused, seeming to gather his courage. I'd like to offer you a job, Kira. Full-time working with Sophie. The pay would be. He named a figure that made Kira's eyes widen. It was more than she made in 6 months at the hospital. I can't, she said immediately. That's too much. I barely know you. But you saved my daughter's life, Jonathan said. You've already proven you'd protect her with your own. I can't think of anyone I'd trust more. Kira looked down at the 2 girls, who were watching this conversation with the intensity of adults. Sophie's green eyes held hope and something that looked like desperation. Destiny was trying to be supportive, but Kira could see she was excited by the possibility. I need to think about it, Kira said finally. Of course, Jonathan said. Take all the time you need. But as they sat down to dinner, a meal prepared by a chef that was better than anything Kira had ever tasted, she found herself already imagining what it would be like to be part of this world. Not for the money or the luxury, but for the little girl who'd been through too much loss and clearly needed someone who understood what it meant to fight for the people you love. The question was she ready to change her entire life for a family that wasn't even hers? As Sophie reached across the table to hold her hand during dinner prayer, Kira thought maybe the answer was yes. 3 weeks into her new position as Sophie's companion and tutor, Kira was beginning to understand the true scope of what she'd taken on. The Pierce mansion might have looked like a fairy tale from the outside, but inside, it was a beautiful prison for a little girl who desperately needed to feel normal. "I don't want to do piano today," Sophie announced, crossing her arms and glaring at the baby grand piano in the music room. Kira looked up from the reading workbook they'd been using. This was Sophie's third outburst this week, and Kira was beginning to recognize the pattern. The little girl would be fine for days, laughing and playing and acting like any normal 6-year-old, and then something would trigger her and she'd shut down completely. "Okay," Kira said calmly, closing the workbook. "What do you want to do instead?" Sophie looked surprised. She'd clearly expected an argument. "We don't have to do piano?" "Not if you don't want to. But I'd like to know why you're upset." Sophie's tough expression crumbled, and suddenly she looked every bit as young and vulnerable as she really was. "Mrs. Henderson always made me do piano even when I was sad. She said Daddy paid her to teach me, so I had to learn." Mrs. Henderson had been Sophie's previous nanny, a stern woman in her 60s who believed in structure above all else. Kira had heard enough stories to know that while the woman had kept Sophie safe and educated, she'd done little to address the emotional needs of a grieving child. "Well, I'm not Mrs. Henderson," Kira said, moving to sit beside Sophie on the piano bench. "And I think it's important to listen to our feelings, not ignore them." "Really? Really? So what's making you sad today?" Sophie was quiet for a long moment, her small fingers tracing patterns on the piano keys without making sound. "I miss my mama." Kira's heart clenched. "Tell me about her." "She used to play piano with me. Not lessons, just fun songs. She'd make up silly words to go with the music." Sophie's voice was barely above a whisper. "She said music was supposed to make you happy, not stressed. Your mama sounds like she was very wise. She was the best mama in the whole world." Sophie looked up at Kira with tear-filled eyes. "Do you think she'd be mad that I like you?" The question hit Kira like a physical blow. She'd been wondering the same thing herself, whether she was overstepping boundaries, whether her growing attachment to Sophie was appropriate. "Oh, sweetheart," Kira said, pulling the little girl into her arms. "I think your mama would be happy that you have people who care about you. Love isn't something we run out of. The more we share it, the more we have. That's what Daddy says too, but sometimes I feel guilty for being happy." Kira held Sophie tighter, thinking about her own struggles with guilt after Destiny's father left. How many nights had she wondered if she was enough, if she was doing the right things, if her love could possibly be sufficient for all the roles she had to play. "Can I tell you a secret?" Kira said. Sophie nodded against her shoulder. "Sometimes I feel guilty for being happy too. When Destiny's daddy left, I thought maybe I wasn't good enough to keep our family together. But you know what I learned?" "What?" "I learned that feeling guilty for being happy doesn't help anyone. It just makes us sadder. And I think your mama would want you to be as happy as possible." They sat together in comfortable silence for a while, and Kira found herself humming a simple melody one her own grandmother had sung to her when she was sad. "That's pretty," Sophie said. "What song is that?" "Just something my grandma used to sing." "Want me to teach it to you?" Sophie nodded, and for the next hour they made up silly songs and played simple melodies together. By the time Jonathan came home from work, both girls were giggling and making enough noise to wake the entire neighborhood. "It sounds like you two are having more fun than anyone should be allowed to have," he said, appearing in the doorway with a smile that made Kira's stomach flutter unexpectedly. "Daddy? Miss Kira taught me a song about an elephant who forgot how to dance." Sophie launched into an enthusiastic and completely off-key rendition of their creation. Jonathan listened with the serious attention he might give to a board presentation, nodding and asking questions about the elephant's dancing problems. Watching him with Sophie, Kira could see how much he loved his daughter, but also how hard he was trying to be perfect at everything. "That's the most creative song I've ever heard," he said when Sophie finished. "You two make a good team." "We do," Sophie agreed. "Miss Kira says we can plant a garden tomorrow if it's not raining. A real garden where we can grow vegetables and flowers." Jonathan looked at Kira with raised eyebrows. "A garden?" "She needs to get her hands dirty," Kira said. "All kids do. It's good for them to watch things grow, to take care of something living. But the landscaping crew can work around one small garden patch," Kira finished. "Sophie needs to feel like she has some control over her environment, some way to make things happen through her own efforts." Jonathan studied her for a moment, and Kira wondered if she'd overstepped. She was an employee after all, not a family member. But then he smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. You're absolutely right. Sophie, you and Miss Kira can plant whatever kind of garden you want. Really, Daddy? Really? In fact, I might even help if you don't mind getting my hands dirty too. Sophie's face lit up like Christmas morning. Yes. We can all garden together. Later that evening, after Sophie had gone to bed, Kira found herself in the kitchen making tea. She'd taken to staying a bit later than necessary, partly because Sophie often needed bedtime stories, but partly because she enjoyed these quiet moments in the beautiful house. You don't have to clean up, Jonathan said, appearing in the kitchen as she rinsed her teacup. I don't mind. Besides, I made the mess. Kira. His voice was serious enough that she turned to face him. I owe you an apology. For what? For hiring you under false pretenses. Kira felt her heart skip. I don't understand. Jonathan ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she'd noticed he made when he was nervous. I told myself I was hiring you to help Sophie with her studies and provide security awareness. But the truth is, I hired you because my daughter smiled more in one evening with you than she had in the entire year before that. Jonathan. Let me finish, he said. I hired you because you brought something into this house that all my money couldn't buy: warmth, real caring, the kind of love that doesn't come with conditions or contracts. Kira didn't know what to say. She'd felt the same pull, the same sense that she was meant to be here, but hearing him acknowledge it made it feel dangerous and real. Sophie's not the only one who's been happier since you came, Jonathan continued. For the first time since Christina died, this house feels like a home instead of just a place where we exist. She talks about her mother, Kira said softly. About how Christina used to make music fun instead of work. Christina would have loved you, Jonathan said without hesitation. She would have been grateful that Sophie has someone who understands what she needs. They stood in the kitchen, the air between them charged with unspoken feelings and possibilities. Kira knew she should say something professional, something to maintain the boundaries between employer and employee. Instead, she heard herself say, I care about her too. More than I probably should. There's no such thing as caring too much, Jonathan said. At least that's what I'm hoping. The weight of his words settled between them. This wasn't just about Sophie anymore, and they both knew it. But before either of them could say anything else, the moment was interrupted by the sound of small feet on the stairs. Miss Kira? I had a bad dream, Sophie called out. Kira immediately headed toward the stairs, her maternal instincts taking over. I'm coming, sweetheart. As she climbed the stairs to comfort a frightened child, Kira realized that the walls she'd built around her heart were crumbling, one bedtime story at a time. Destiny, can you pass the potatoes please? Sophie asked politely, using the manner she'd been taught but with the genuine warmth that had developed over the past month. Kira watched her daughter carefully serve the mashed potatoes onto Sophie's plate, and her heart swelled with pride. This was their 5th family dinner together, and what had started as an awkward arrangement was beginning to feel as natural as breathing. Thank you, Sophie said. These are the best potatoes ever. That's because Miss Rosa taught me her secret ingredient, Destiny said proudly. Miss Rosa was the Pierce family cook, a kind woman from El Salvador who had taken both girls under her wing. What's the secret ingredient? Jonathan asked, playing along with the elaborate mystery the girls had constructed around the cooking lesson. We can't tell, both girls said in unison, then dissolved into giggles. Kira met Jonathan's eyes across the dinner table, and they shared a moment of pure parental joy. These were the moments she'd dreamed of when Destiny was born, family dinners filled with laughter and conversation and the comfortable chaos of children being children. Miss Kira, tell Daddy about the butterfly we saw in our garden today, Sophie said, taking a bite of the green beans she'd grown herself. We saw a monarch butterfly, Kira said, smiling at the memory. It landed right on Sophie's sunflower and stayed there for almost 5 minutes. It was so beautiful, Sophie added. Orange and black with white spots. Miss Kira says it might have traveled hundreds of miles to get to our garden. Thousands, Destiny corrected. Some monarch butterflies fly all the way from Canada to Mexico. We learned about it in school. Jonathan listened to the girls discuss butterfly migration patterns with the same attention he gave to business presentations. Over the past weeks, Kira had noticed how he made every conversation with Sophie feel important, never dismissing her interests as childish. Maybe we should plant more flowers that butterflies like, he suggested. I could ask the landscaping crew to research native plants. Or we could research it ourselves, Kira said. The girls are old enough to learn about gardening and nature. It could be a science project. Yes. Sophie bounced in her chair. Can we go to the library and get books about butterflies? The library? Jonathan looked surprised. Kira realized he probably hadn't been to a public library in years, if ever. It's good for children to use public resources, to understand that learning doesn't always require buying something. I love the library, Destiny added. Mrs. Patterson reads stories every Wednesday, and they have a summer reading program with prizes. What kind of prizes? Sophie asked, intrigued. Books mostly. And stickers. Last year I won a bookmark that looked like a dragon. Sophie turned to her father with pleading eyes. Daddy, can I join the summer reading program? Jonathan looked at Kira, and she could see him weighing security concerns against his daughter's obvious excitement. It was a struggle she'd watched him have repeatedly, wanting to give Sophie normal experiences while keeping her safe. We could start with the Wednesday story time, Kira suggested. It's public, well-supervised, and I'd be there with both girls. Please, Daddy? Sophie added. All right, Jonathan said, and Sophie's squeal of delight made him smile. But we'll need to discuss security arrangements. Of course, Kira agreed, though privately she thought Sophie needed less security and more normalcy. After dinner, the girls went upstairs to play while Kira and Jonathan cleaned up together. It had become their routine, a quiet time to talk about Sophie's progress and plan activities for the next day. She's different, Jonathan said, loading plates into the dishwasher. Happier. More alive. She's healing, Kira said simply. Children are resilient when they feel safe and loved. It's not just Sophie, Jonathan said quietly. Destiny is thriving here too. She's more confident, more outgoing. Kira nodded. It was true. Having a friend like Sophie, access to resources she'd never had before, and the stability of a two-parent household, even if Kira was technically just an employee, had brought out a side of Destiny that Kira had always known was there but hadn't always been able to nurture. They're good for each other, she said. And you're good for all of us. The words hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning neither of them was quite ready to address directly. Jonathan, Kira started, then stopped. She'd been thinking about this conversation for days, but now that the moment was here, she wasn't sure how to begin. What is it? This arrangement, it's not typical. I know that. And I don't want you to feel obligated to include Destiny and me in family activities just because you're grateful for what happened that night. Jonathan stopped loading dishes and turned to face her fully. Is that what you think this is? Gratitude. I don't know what this is, Kira admitted. I just know that Sophie is getting attached and Destiny is getting attached and I. She trailed off. And you? And I'm getting attached too, she finished quietly. To Sophie, to this life, to the idea that maybe we could be something more than just employee and employer. Jonathan stepped closer and Kira's breath caught. What if I told you I want the same thing? I'd say you're my boss and I can't afford to lose this job. And what if I told you that I've been thinking about asking you to marry me? The words hit Kira like a physical shock. She stared at him, certain she'd misheard. Marry you? I know it sounds crazy, Jonathan said quickly. I know we haven't known each other long, and I know this situation is complicated. But Kira, you've brought life back into this house. You've given Sophie something I couldn't give her no matter how much money I spent. And you've given me something I thought I'd lost forever. What's that? Hope, he said simply. Hope that maybe we don't have to be broken forever. Hope that maybe two people who've been hurt can build something beautiful together. Kira's mind was racing. Marriage? They'd barely acknowledged their feelings for each other, and he was talking about marriage? Jonathan, that's a huge leap. I know. And I'm not asking for an answer tonight. I'm just asking you to think about it. Think about what we could build together, not just for us but for the girls. Before Kira could respond, the sound of laughter from upstairs reminded them both that this conversation was about more than just the two of them. They already act like sisters, Jonathan continued. Sophie lights up every morning because she knows Destiny will be here. And I've seen how Destiny looks at you when you're with Sophie. She's proud of how much love you have to give. This is crazy, Kira whispered, but even as she said it, she was imagining what it would be like. What it would be like to wake up in this house every morning, to be Sophie's mother in truth instead of just in feeling, to give Destiny the father figure she'd never had. Maybe, Jonathan agreed. But sometimes the best things in life are crazy. The sound of feet on the stairs interrupted them, and both girls appeared in the kitchen doorway. Miss Kira, can you read us a story? Sophie asked. Both of us, Destiny added. We want to share a story. Kira looked at Jonathan, her heart full of conflicting emotions. Of course, girls. Go pick out a book. As the children ran back upstairs, Jonathan caught her hand. "Just think about it," he said. "Think about what we could be." Later that night, as Kira tucked both girls into Sophie's enormous bed for what had become their nightly story time, she found herself looking at them with new eyes. Sophie curled up on one side, Destiny on the other, both of them listening with rapt attention to the fairy tale about a princess who saved herself. "Miss Kira," Sophie said sleepily when the story ended, "I wish you could stay here all the time." "Me too," Destiny added. "It feels like we're a real family when we're all together." Kira's throat tightened with emotion. "You girls are very special to me." "We love you," Sophie said simply. "We love you too," Destiny echoed. As Kira turned off the lights and headed downstairs, Jonathan's words echoed in her mind. Marriage. Family. A chance to give both girls everything they needed and deserved. It was crazy. It was impractical. It was the biggest risk she'd ever considered taking. But as she thought about the laughter at dinner, the joy in both girls' faces, and the way Jonathan looked at her like she was the answer to prayers he'd been afraid to pray, Kira realized that maybe crazy wasn't such a bad thing. Maybe crazy was exactly what they all needed. The public library was busier than Jonathan had expected. Children and parents filled the reading area, and the cheerful chaos reminded him of just how isolated Sophie's life had become. He watched from a corner chair as Kira sat cross-legged on the carpet with both girls, all three of them completely absorbed in the librarian's animated reading of Where the Wild Things Are. Sophie was leaning against Kira's shoulder, her thumb nearly in her mouth, a habit that only emerged when she felt completely safe and content. Destiny sat on Kira's other side, occasionally whispering comments that made Sophie giggle. This was what normal looked like, Jonathan realized. Not private tutors and structured activities, but sitting on a library carpet listening to stories with other children. Sophie fit in perfectly, raising her hand to answer questions and clapping when the story ended, just like any other 6-year-old. "Mr. Pierce?" A woman's voice interrupted his thoughts. He looked up to see a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a library name tag. "Yes. I'm Patricia, the children's librarian. Sophie is delightful. Is this her first time joining us?" "Yes, it is. She's really enjoying it. She and Destiny make quite a team." "Are they sisters?" The question caught Jonathan off guard. He glanced toward where Kira was helping both girls select books from the display table, and realized how they must look to outsiders like a complete family. "Not yet," he heard himself say, surprising himself with the answer. Patricia smiled knowingly. "Well, they certainly act like sisters. And your wife is wonderful with children. Is she a teacher?" "She's a nurse," Jonathan corrected automatically, then realized he hadn't corrected the wife assumption. Even better. Medical professionals make excellent parents. They're so good at staying calm in crisis situations. Before Jonathan could figure out how to respond to that, Kira approached with both girls in tow, each carrying a stack of books. "Daddy, look. I got books about butterflies and gardens and horses," Sophie announced, holding up her selections. "And I got books about space and dinosaurs," Destiny added proudly. "Those look like excellent choices," Jonathan said. "Did you both sign up for the reading program?" "Yes," both girls said in unison. Kira smiled at their enthusiasm. "They each need to read 20 books over the summer to win the grand prize." "What's the grand prize?" Jonathan asked. "A $50 gift card to the bookstore," Destiny said breathlessly, as if it were $1 million. Jonathan's first instinct was to offer to buy them both $50 worth of books immediately, but he caught Kira's subtle head shake and understood. This wasn't about the prize, it was about the accomplishment, the work, the satisfaction of earning something through effort. "Well then, we better make sure we have plenty of reading time," he said instead. On the drive home, Jonathan found himself stealing glances at Kira in the passenger seat while the girls chattered in the back about their library adventure. She looked relaxed and happy, her natural beauty enhanced by genuine joy. "Thank you," he said quietly so the girls couldn't hear. "For what?" "For knowing what she needed. I would have kept her isolated in that house forever if you hadn't pushed for this. She needs to be around other children. She needs to know she's not different from them, despite all the money and security." Jonathan nodded, but privately he wondered if that was even possible. Sophie would inherit one of the largest fortunes in the country. She'd never have to work, never have to struggle, never have to make the kind of sacrifices that built character. "What are you thinking about?" Kira asked, seeming to read his mood. "Just wondering if I'm doing everything wrong. If all this wealth is going to ruin her." "Money doesn't ruin children," Kira said firmly. Lack of love ruins children. Lack of boundaries ruins children. Lack of purpose ruins children. But Sophie has love, and you're learning about boundaries and will help her find purpose. We. Kira blushed, realizing what she'd said. I mean, whoever is helping raise her. But Jonathan smiled at the slip, because it gave him hope that maybe she was thinking about his proposal more seriously than she'd let on. That evening, after both girls had fallen asleep in Sophie's room surrounded by library books, Jonathan and Kira found themselves in his study. It was a comfortable room lined with books, with 2 leather chairs facing a fireplace that was purely decorative in the summer heat. Can I ask you something personal? Kira said, curled up in one of the chairs with a cup of tea. Anything. What was Christina like? Jonathan was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee cup. Most people avoided mentioning his deceased wife, as if talking about her would cause him pain. But Kira's question felt different, not voyeuristic, but genuinely caring. She was sunshine, he said finally. That sounds like a cliché, but she literally lit up every room she entered. She was funny and kind and completely unimpressed by money or status. How did you meet? She was a kindergarten teacher at the school where I was doing volunteer reading. I was there because my publicist thought it would be good for my image. He smiled at the memory. Christina called me out on it immediately. Said if I was going to read to her kids, I better actually care about them, not just about looking good in photos. Sounds like she was smart, brilliant, and completely right. She taught me that there's no point in having resources if you don't use them to make the world better. Kira was quiet, and Jonathan realized she might be feeling awkward about the comparison. She would have loved you, he said. Christina always said that the best people are the ones who act when action is needed, without stopping to calculate the cost to themselves. That's exactly what you did the night you saved Sophie. I've been thinking about that night a lot lately, Kira said. About how everything changed so quickly. Do you regret it? No, she said immediately. Never. But sometimes I wonder if I'm in over my head here. Your world is so different from mine. Jonathan set down his coffee and leaned forward. What if it didn't have to be my world or your world? What if it could be our world? Kira met his eyes, and he could see the war between hope and fear playing out in her expression. Jonathan, I need to be honest with you about something. Okay. I'm falling in love with you, she said quietly. With you and with Sophie and with this life we're building. And that terrifies me. Jonathan's heart stopped. Why does it terrify you? Because I've been hurt before. Because Destiny's father made me promises he didn't keep. Because I can't afford to get my heart broken again, and I especially can't afford for Destiny to get her heart broken. Jonathan stood up and moved to kneel beside her chair. Kira, look at me. She turned to face him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. I can't promise that life will be perfect, he said. I can't promise that we won't face challenges or that everything will always be easy. But I can promise that I would never hurt you intentionally. I can promise that I want to build something real and lasting with you. How can you be so sure? We've only known each other 2 months. Because in 2 months, you've shown me more authentic love and care than I've seen in years. Because Sophie lights up when you're around in a way she never has with anyone else. Because Destiny trusts me enough to call me Jonathan instead of Mr. Pierce, and I know that's because you trust me. He took her hands in his. Because when I imagine my future, I can't picture it without you in it. Kira was crying now, but they were tears of hope rather than fear. The girls, she whispered, love you completely. They're already acting like sisters. The differences in our backgrounds don't matter. What matters is that we both want the same things: to love and protect our children, to build a family based on genuine care rather than obligation. Jonathan, she said, and he could hear the yes in her voice before she said it. Will you marry me, Kira? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that you made the right choice when you decided to trust me? She was quiet for so long that Jonathan began to worry he'd pushed too hard, too fast. But then she smiled through her tears. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. Jonathan stood and pulled her into his arms, holding her close and breathing in the scent of her hair. For the first time since Christina died, he felt complete. Upstairs, 2 little girls slept peacefully, surrounded by books and dreams, unaware that their lives were about to change in the most wonderful way possible. They were going to be a real family at last. The threatening phone call came on a Tuesday morning while Kira was helping the girls with their summer reading. She almost didn't answer the unknown number, but something made her pick up. You shouldn't have interfered, a gravelly voice said without preamble. Kira's blood ran cold. Who is this? You know who this is. You cost us a lot of money, lady. The boss isn't happy. Sophie looked up from her book, sensing the change in Kira's demeanor. Miss Kira? Are you okay? Kira forced a smile and mouthed, 1 minute, while walking into the hallway. What do you want? We want you to mind your own business from now on. Stop playing house with the rich man. Take your kid and disappear. Are you threatening me? I'm giving you good advice. Next time we won't be so polite. The line went dead. Kira stood in the hallway, her hands shaking as she tried to process what had just happened. The kidnapping attempt 2 months ago hadn't been random, there was an organization behind it, and they weren't done with the Pierce family. Miss Kira? Destiny appeared in the doorway, her face creased with worry. You look scared. Kira immediately knelt down and pulled her daughter into a hug. I'm fine, baby. Just a wrong number. But she wasn't fine, and Destiny was too perceptive not to notice. Over the past 2 months of living in the Pierce mansion, both girls had become more attuned to adult emotions, more aware of the subtle undercurrents that flowed beneath their protected daily routine. Was it about the bad man from before? Sophie asked, joining them in the hallway with her book still clutched in her hand. Kira looked at the two little faces staring up at her with complete trust, and realized she couldn't handle this alone. These weren't just anonymous threats, they were targeting her family now. Her family and Jonathan's family, which were becoming the same thing. Girls, I need you to go play in the garden room while I make a phone call, okay? Both children nodded solemnly and headed downstairs. Kira watched them go, her heart aching with the knowledge that their innocence was about to be shattered again. She called Jonathan immediately. Kira? Is everything okay? You sound upset. I need you to come home. No. We have a problem. Jonathan didn't ask questions. I'm leaving the office now. 20 minutes. Kira spent those 20 minutes trying to stay calm for the girls while her mind raced through possibilities. Should they call the police? Should they increase security? Should she take Destiny and leave as the voice had suggested? That last option made her stomach clench with pain. She'd just agreed to marry Jonathan, just started to believe that they could build a real life together. The idea of walking away from Sophie, from the love she'd found, felt like tearing her own heart out. But if staying put Destiny in danger? Kira? Jonathan's voice called from the front door. She'd given him barely the outline over the phone, but she could hear the tension in his voice. She met him in the foyer, and he immediately pulled her into his arms. Tell me what happened. Kira repeated the conversation word for word, watching Jonathan's expression grow darker with each detail. They know about us, she said when she finished. They know I'm living here, they know about Destiny. This isn't just about Sophie anymore. Jonathan's jaw was tight with controlled anger. I'm calling Detective Rodriguez and my security team. This ends now. Jonathan, maybe I should take Destiny and go stay somewhere else until? No. His voice was firm. Absolutely not. But if they're targeting us because of our relationship, then we deal with it together. As a family. He cupped her face in his hands. Kira, I just got you. I just got the chance at the life I want. I'm not letting some criminals take that away from us. What if they hurt the girls? They won't. I promise you they won't get close to either of our daughters again. Within an hour, the house was swarming with activity. Detective Rodriguez arrived with 2 other officers, Jonathan's security team conducted a threat assessment, and technical specialists began installing additional monitoring equipment. The girls watched all of this with wide eyes from the safety of the kitchen, where Miss Rosa was keeping them occupied with cooking lessons. Mama, Destiny said quietly when Kira came to check on them, are the bad men coming back? Kira looked at Sophie, who was trying to be brave but whose hands were shaking as she stirred cookie batter. We're being extra careful to make sure you're both safe, Kira said. There are going to be some changes for a while, more security people around, different rules about going places. Like prison? Sophie asked in a small voice. No, sweetheart. Like a castle with guards to protect the princess. Jonathan appeared in the kitchen doorway, his expression grim but determined. Girls, can I talk to you for a minute? Both children looked at him with complete attention. Some bad people are trying to scare us, he said, sitting down at their level. But I want you to know that we have lots of good people helping to keep us safe. Police officers, security guards, and most importantly, each other. Are they the same bad people who tried to take me before? Sophie asked. We think so. But Sophie, remember how Miss Kira protected you that night? And remember how brave you were? Sophie nodded. Well, now we're all going to protect each other. Miss Kira and I are going to keep you and Destiny safe, and you girls are going to help by following all our safety rules. What kind of rules? Destiny asked. Stay together always. No going outside without a grown-up. If anyone you don't know tries to talk to you, run to the nearest adult immediately. The girls nodded solemnly, understanding that this was serious. Later that evening, after Detective Rodriguez had left with promises to increase patrols around the house and after the security team had finished their installations, Jonathan and Kira sat in the living room while the girls played nearby. "I've been thinking," Jonathan said quietly. "Maybe we should move up the wedding." Kira looked at him in surprise. "Move it up? If we're married, if you and Destiny are legally part of this family, my security resources become your security resources automatically. No questions, no delays. Jonathan, you don't have to marry me to protect me. That's not why I'm suggesting it." He took her hand. "I'm suggesting it because life is uncertain and we've found something real. Why wait?" Kira thought about the fear she'd felt that morning, the terror of potentially losing everything she'd just found. "How quickly are we talking?" "This weekend. Small ceremony, just us and the girls and whoever else you want there. We can have a big celebration later if you want, but right now, I want to make this official." "What about Sophie?" This is all happening so fast for her. As if summoned by their conversation, Sophie appeared at Kira's elbow. "Miss Kira, are you and Daddy getting married?" Kira looked at Jonathan, who nodded encouragingly. "Yes, sweetheart. We are." "When?" "Very soon. This weekend maybe?" Sophie's face lit up with pure joy. "Really? This weekend? Would that make you happy?" Kira asked. "Yes. Then you'll be my real mama, and Destiny will be my real sister." Destiny appeared from behind the couch. "We're getting married this weekend?" "If you want to," Jonathan said. "Would you like Kira to be your stepmother officially?" "Yes," Destiny said, launching herself into Jonathan's arms. "Can I call you Daddy then?" Jonathan's eyes filled with tears. "I would love that more than anything." As Kira watched her daughter embrace the man who was about to become her father, and watched Sophie dance around the room with excitement, she realized that maybe the phone call that morning hadn't been just a threat. Maybe it had been the push they needed to stop waiting for the perfect moment and start living the life they wanted. "Okay," she said, smiling through her own tears. "Let's get married this weekend." The threats from their past weren't going to define their future. Love was going to define their future. And love, Kira was learning, was the strongest protection of all. "I know this isn't the most romantic proposal in the world," Jonathan said, pacing around his study while Kira sat in the leather chair, watching him with amused affection. "Getting married because of security threats and legal protections instead of candles and rose petals." "Jonathan, sit down," Kira said gently. "You're making me dizzy." He stopped pacing and looked at her, running his hand through his hair in the gesture she'd grown to love. "I just want you to know that even though the timing isn't ideal, my feelings are completely real." "I know they are. Mine are too. And I want you to know that you can change your mind. If this feels too rushed, if you want to wait until the security situation is resolved." "Jonathan." Kira stood up and walked over to him, placing her hands on his chest. "Look at me." He stopped talking and met her eyes. "I'm not marrying you just for protection. I'm marrying you because I love you. Because I love Sophie. Because I want Destiny to have the father she's never had. Because I want us to be a real family. Even though we've only known each other 2 months? My grandmother always said that when you know, you know. She met my grandfather on a Tuesday and married him on a Saturday. They were together for 53 years. Jonathan smiled at that. 53 years sounds perfect. "It's a good start," Kira agreed. They were interrupted by a knock on the study door. "Come in," Jonathan called. Both girls peered around the door frame, still in their pajamas despite it being nearly noon. They'd been up late the night before, too excited about the wedding to sleep. "Daddy, can we help plan the wedding?" Sophie asked. "There's not much to plan, sweetheart. We're keeping it very simple. But we need flowers," Destiny said seriously. "And a cake. And pretty dresses. And rings," Sophie added. "You have to have rings." Jonathan and Kira exchanged glances. In their focus on legal protections and security arrangements, they'd forgotten that to the girls, this was still a fairy tale wedding. "You're absolutely right," Kira said. "We do need all those things. Do you want to help us pick them out?" Both girls nodded enthusiastically. "But first," Jonathan said, "we need to make some phone calls. Miss Kira needs to invite her family, and we need to arrange for a minister." "What about Grandma Betty?" Destiny asked. Kira's expression grew complicated. Betty Washington was Kira's mother, a proud woman who cleaned offices for a living and had raised 3 children alone after her husband died young. She'd been supportive when Kira became a single mother, But she'd also been vocal about her distrust of wealthy men who made big promises. "I'll call her," Kira said, though she might have some questions about the speed of all this. "Will she like me?" Sophie asked with the directness that only children possess. "She'll love you," Kira assured her. "But she might need some time to get used to all the changes." 2 hours later, after phone calls to family members and a rushed trip to the jewelry store with 2 very opinionated little girls, the Pierce family was officially preparing for a wedding in 3 days. Kira's mother had been surprised but ultimately supportive, especially when Kira explained the security concerns. "That man better treat you right," Betty had said. "And if he doesn't, he'll answer to me." Kira's sister Linda was flying in from Chicago, along with her teenage son Marcus. Jonathan's parents were driving up from their retirement home in Florida. Detective Rodriguez had agreed to serve as a witness, along with Miss Rosa, who had cried happy tears when they told her the news. "It's not going to be a big wedding," Kira warned the girls as they sat in the jewelry store watching the salesperson size rings. "But it's going to be perfect," Sophie said confidently. "Because we're all going to be together forever." The salesperson, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, smiled at Sophie's declaration. "Are you the flower girls?" "I'm going to be the maid of honor," Destiny announced. "And Sophie's going to be the flower girl." "Actually," Jonathan said, "I was hoping you'd both be my best women. I can't choose between you." Both girls giggled at the idea of being best women, instead of traditional flower girls. "Sir," the salesperson said to Jonathan, "the rings are ready. Would you like to see them?" Jonathan had chosen a simple platinum band for himself and a matching one for Kira, with a modest diamond solitaire engagement ring. Nothing flashy or ostentatious. Kira had specifically requested something she could wear while working without feeling self-conscious. "They're beautiful," Kira said, slipping the engagement ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly and caught the light in a way that made her breath catch. "Miss Kira, you look like a princess," Sophie said in wonder. "No," Destiny corrected. "She looks like a queen." That evening, after the girls had finally gone to sleep, Jonathan and Kira found themselves back in the study, going over last-minute wedding details and security arrangements. "Detective Rodriguez thinks they'll make their move before the wedding," Jonathan said, reviewing the security briefing. "If they're going to try to intimidate us into backing down, it would be in the next few days." "Are you having second thoughts?" Kira asked. "About all of this happening so quickly?" Jonathan set down the security report and pulled her onto his lap in the chair. "Never. Are you?" "Sometimes I can't believe this is real," she admitted. 6 months ago I was working double shifts just to pay rent. Now I'm marrying a billionaire and living in a mansion." "You're not marrying a billionaire," Jonathan said firmly. "You're marrying me. The money is just circumstance. Easy for you to say you've never been without it." Jonathan was quiet for a moment. "You're right. I've never had to worry about money, never had to make the kind of sacrifices you've made. But Kira, I've never had what you gave me so easily." "What's that?" "A reason to want to be better. Someone who loves me for who I am, not what I can provide. A partner who challenges me to think beyond my own experience." Kira curled against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "I love you," she said simply. "I love you too. More than I thought I could love anyone again." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, thinking about how dramatically their lives were about to change. In 3 days they'd be married. Kira would officially be Sophie's stepmother. Destiny would officially have a father. They'd be a real family legally and emotionally. "Jonathan," Kira said suddenly, "what happens if the security threats don't go away? What if this is our life from now on, always looking over our shoulders, always worried about the girls' safety? Then we deal with it together." "But Kira, I need you to know something." "What?" "Even if there were no security threats, even if we'd met under completely normal circumstances, I'd still want to marry you. I'd still want you to be Sophie's mother and Destiny's stepfather. This isn't just about protection, it's about love." "Promise me something," Kira said. "Anything. Promise me that no matter what happens, whether the threats continue or disappear, whether our life gets easier or harder, we'll always be honest with each other about what we're feeling." "I promise," Jonathan said, sealing it with a kiss. Outside, the security guards patrolled the grounds, watching for any sign of danger. But inside the house, 2 adults and 2 children were building something that no threat could destroy. A family based on love, trust, and the unshakable belief that they were stronger together than they could ever be apart. In 3 days it would be official. But in their hearts it already was. The wedding took place on a perfect Saturday morning in the Pierce family's garden. The same garden where Sophie and Kira had planted their first seeds together, where both girls had learned to nurture growing things with patience and care. Kira stood in the upstairs bedroom that would soon officially be hers, looking at herself in the full-length mirror. She wore a simple cream-colored dress that Linda had helped her pick out, elegant but not ostentatious, appropriate for a second wedding but still special enough for the magnitude of what was happening. "Mama, you look so beautiful," Destiny said from behind her. Her daughter was wearing a pale yellow dress that matched Sophie's. Both girls had insisted on being twins for the wedding. Destiny's hair was styled in small braids with yellow ribbons, and she carried a small bouquet of flowers from their garden. "Thank you, baby," Kira said, turning to hug her daughter. "Are you ready for this? Are you ready to officially be Sophie's sister?" "I've been ready since the first day we came here," Destiny said with the wisdom that sometimes surprised Kira. "Sophie needs a sister and I need a sister too. And you're ready to have Jonathan as your daddy?" Destiny nodded seriously. "He's already been like a daddy to me. He helps me with my homework and he listens when I talk about school, and he tucks me in at night sometimes when you're busy with Sophie." Kira's eyes filled with tears at her daughter's simple acceptance of their new family structure. "I love you so much, Destiny. I love you too, Mama. And I'm proud of you for being brave enough to save Sophie that night. If you hadn't been brave, we never would have found our family." A soft knock interrupted their moment. "Can we come in?" Linda's voice called through the door. "Come in," Kira called back. Linda entered with Betty Washington, Kira's mother, who looked elegant in her navy blue dress and pearls. Behind them came Sophie, practically bouncing with excitement in her matching yellow dress. "Oh, baby girl," Betty said, looking at her daughter with tears in her eyes. "You look beautiful." "Thanks, Mama." Kira hugged her mother, breathing in the familiar scent of the gardenia perfume Betty had worn for as long as she could remember. "I have something for you," Betty said, reaching into her purse. She pulled out a simple gold bracelet. "This was your grandmother's. She wore it on her wedding day and I wore it on mine." Kira's throat tightened with emotion as her mother fastened the bracelet around her wrist. "Something old," she whispered. "Something new," Linda said, handing her a small wrapped box. Inside was a pair of pearl earrings. "From your big sister who loves you." "Something borrowed," Sophie announced, carefully handing Kira a small velvet box. "From my mama's jewelry box. Daddy said she would want you to wear something of hers." Inside the box was a delicate necklace with a small diamond pendant, nothing flashy, but clearly precious. Kira looked up at Betty and Linda to make sure it was appropriate to accept such a gift. "That woman loved her daughter more than life itself," Betty said quietly. "If she chose to share her son with you, she'd want you to have something beautiful to wear on your wedding day." "Something blue," Destiny announced, producing a small blue flower from her bouquet and tucking it behind Kira's ear. "There," Sophie said, stepping back to survey their work. "Now you're perfect for marrying Daddy." 10 minutes later, Kira walked down the garden path toward where Jonathan waited under an archway of white roses. The guests were small in number but large and loved Detective Rodriguez and his wife, Miss Rosa and her family, Jonathan's parents, Linda's son Marcus, and a few close family friends. But Kira only had eyes for Jonathan, who stood watching her approach with an expression of complete adoration. He wore a simple gray suit with a yellow tie that matched the girls' dresses, and when he smiled at her, she felt like the most beautiful woman in the world. Sophie walked ahead of her, carefully scattering rose petals from their garden. Destiny walked beside Kira, officially serving as both maid of honor and the person giving her away. Minister Thompson, a kind man from the community church they'd started attending, smiled as the small procession reached the altar. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Jonathan and Kira, and to celebrate the creation of a new family that includes not just these two adults, but their daughters Sophie and Destiny." The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. Jonathan and Kira had written their own vows, speaking not just to each other but to their commitment to raise their daughters together. "Kira," Jonathan said, his voice steady but emotional, "you came into my life at a moment when I thought my capacity for love had been broken forever. You showed me that hearts can heal, that families can grow, and that sometimes the most beautiful things come from the most unexpected places." He turned to include both girls in his gaze. "I promise to love you, to protect our family, to be the father that Destiny deserves and the husband that you deserve. I promise to honor Christina's memory by giving Sophie all the love and guidance she needs, and I promise to build a life with you that's worthy of the courage you showed the night you saved my daughter." Kira's voice trembled slightly as she spoke her vows. "Jonathan, you and Sophie gave Destiny and me something we'd never had: a complete family. You showed me that love doesn't always come in the package we expect, but it always comes exactly when we need it most. She looked at Sophie, who was beaming at her with pure joy. I promise to love Sophie as my own daughter, to help her grow into the amazing woman I know she'll become, and to make sure she always knows how much her first mama loved her. She turned back to Jonathan. And I promise to love you with everything I have, to be your partner in all things, and to build a home with you that's filled with laughter and love and the beautiful chaos of raising children together. When Minister Thompson pronounced them husband and wife, and Jonathan kissed Kira for the first time as her husband, both girls cheered so loudly that the small crowd burst into laughter. Ladies and gentlemen, Minister Thompson announced, I present to you the Pierce family: Jonathan, Kira, Sophie, and Destiny. The reception was held right there in the garden, with Miss Rose's homemade cake and music from a small speaker system. It was nothing like the elaborate society weddings that Jonathan could have afforded, but it was perfect for what they'd created together. Mrs. Pierce, Jonathan said, finding Kira during a quiet moment while the girls played with their cousin Marcus, how does it feel to be officially part of this crazy family? Like coming home, Kira said simply. Like everything that happened before, all the struggle, all the fear, all the uncertainty was just preparing me for this moment. No regrets about the speed of everything? None. You. My only regret is that we didn't meet sooner. As the sun began to set over their first day as a married couple, Kira watched Sophie and Destiny playing together in the garden they'd planted together, their yellow dresses bright against the green of the growing plants. Betty Washington approached her daughter with a smile. That man loves you, she said simply. I know, Mama. And more importantly, he loves Destiny like she's his own. I know that too. Betty nodded approvingly. Then you chose well, baby girl. That little girl of his needed a mama, and your little girl needed a daddy. Sometimes God arranges things in ways we don't expect. Sometimes he does, Kira agreed. Later that evening, after the guests had gone home and the girls had finally fallen asleep in Sophie's room, now officially their shared room, Kira and Jonathan sat on their bedroom balcony, looking out over the garden where they'd just promised to love each other forever. So what happens now? Kira asked, curled up against her husband's side. Now we live, Jonathan said simply. We raise our daughters, we grow old together, and we prove that sometimes fairy tales do come true. Even with security threats and complicated families and all the challenges that come with blending two very different lives? Especially with all of that, Jonathan said. Easy love isn't real love, Kira. Real love is what we choose to build together, day by day, choice by choice. As they sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out over their garden, both of them knew that this was just the beginning of their story. There would be challenges ahead, there always were when building a family. But they'd face those challenges together, with love as their foundation and their daughters as their motivation to be the best people they could be. They'd started as strangers brought together by crisis. They'd become a family by choice, by love, and by the unshakable belief that some things are worth fighting for. And tonight, on their wedding night, they were exactly where they belonged together, safe and surrounded by love. 1 year later, Kira Pierce stood in the same garden where she'd married Jonathan, watching their daughters chase butterflies among the flowers they'd planted together. The threat that had pushed them toward marriage had been resolved 6 months ago when the remaining members of the kidnapping ring were finally arrested, but the love they'd built had only grown stronger. Mama Kira, look, Sophie called out, using the name that had evolved naturally over the months. The monarch butterflies came back. I see them, sweetheart, Kira called back, her hand instinctively moving to rest on her slightly rounded belly. The baby wasn't showing yet, but she and Jonathan had just confirmed what they'd suspected for weeks: their family was about to grow by one more. Destiny came running over, her face flushed with excitement. Can we count them? For our nature journal? Of course we can. Go get your notebook. As Destiny ran toward the house, Sophie slipped her small hand into Kira's. Mama Kira, are you happy? The question was so earnest, so full of a child's need for reassurance, that Kira's heart squeezed with love. I'm very happy, baby girl. Are you? The happiest I've ever been, Sophie said confidently. Even happier than before when I was sad about my first mama dying. Your first mama would be so proud of the young lady you're becoming, Kira said gently. They'd learned to talk about Christina naturally, keeping her memory alive while building new traditions. I know, Sophie said matter-of-factly. Daddy showed me pictures of her last week and I told her all about you and Destiny and how we're a family now. I think she's happy about it. Jonathan appeared on the garden path, having just arrived home from work. His tie was loosened and his sleeves were rolled up, and he looked like a man who was exactly where he wanted to be. How are my favorite ladies doing? he asked, scooping Sophie up for a hug before kissing Kira hello. We're counting butterflies, Sophie announced. And Mama Kira looks extra pretty today. Jonathan studied his wife's face with the attention that still made her heart flutter. She does look extra pretty. In fact, she's been looking extra pretty for about 2 weeks now. Kira met his eyes and saw understanding dawn in them. Really? He whispered. She nodded, smiling at his expression of wonder and joy. Sophie, baby girl, how would you feel about being a big sister? Jonathan asked. Sophie's eyes went wide. Really? We're having a baby? We are, Kira confirmed. Sophie let out a squeal of delight that brought Destiny running back from the house. What's happening? Destiny asked, clutching her notebook. We're having a baby, Sophie announced. I'm going to be a big sister and you're going to be a big sister too. Destiny looked at Kira for confirmation, and when Kira nodded, both girls started jumping up and down with excitement. When? Destiny asked. How big will it be? Can we help take care of it? Slow down, Jonathan laughed. We have lots of time to figure all that out. The baby won't be here until next spring. Just in time for the new garden, Sophie said practically. We can plant baby flowers. That evening, after the girls had gone to bed still chattering excitedly about their future sibling, Kira and Jonathan sat in their study, the same room where he'd first asked her to marry him. Another baby, Jonathan said wonderingly. When Christina and I were trying to have more children, I used to dream about this, a house full of kids and laughter and beautiful chaos. And now I'm living the dream. With you. Kira curled up beside him on the couch they'd added to make the room more comfortable for family time. Are you nervous? About starting over with a newborn? Terrified, Jonathan admitted. But also excited. This baby will be ours from the beginning, yours and mine together. Sophie will get to be a big sister. Destiny will get to experience having a baby in the family. It's going to be wonderful, Kira agreed. Exhausting but wonderful. They sat in comfortable silence, both lost in thoughts about the future. The past year had brought so many changes. Destiny now called Jonathan Daddy without any hesitation. Sophie had blossomed into a confident, happy child who participated in regular activities with other kids, and Kira had found her place not just as a wife and mother, but as a partner in Jonathan's charitable foundation work. Kira, Jonathan said suddenly. Oh? Do you ever think about that night? The night you punched that man and saved Sophie? Sometimes. Why? I think about it all the time. About how easily you could have walked past, minded your own business, kept yourself and Destiny safe. But I didn't. No, you didn't. And because you chose to act, because you chose to be brave, we have all of this. He gestured around the room, but they both knew he meant more than just the physical space. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had walked past, Kira admitted. Would Sophie have been taken? Would we ever have met? Would Destiny have grown up without a father? We'll never know, Jonathan said. But I'm grateful every day that you're the kind of person who steps up when stepping up is needed. I'm grateful every day that you're the kind of man who sees value in people regardless of their bank account or background. A comfortable silence settled between them as they thought about the journey that had brought them here. Jonathan, Kira said eventually. Yes. I have something to tell you. He turned to look at her, eyebrows raised. Detective Rodriguez called this afternoon. They caught the last member of the kidnapping ring. Jonathan sat up straighter. The last one? The leader they'd been looking for? Yes. He was arrested in Florida trying to leave the country. Rodriguez says with his testimony, they can close the case completely. It's really over? It's really over. Jonathan was quiet for a long moment, processing this news. How do you feel about that? Relief mostly. But also, grateful. Grateful? If that man hadn't tried to take Sophie, if I hadn't been walking down that street at exactly that moment, if I hadn't decided to act, we never would have found each other. Jonathan pulled her closer. So you're grateful for the worst night of our lives? I'm grateful for the night that led to the best life I could have imagined. The next morning brought the usual beautiful chaos of family life. Sophie and Destiny could barely contain their excitement about the baby news, chattering through breakfast about names and nursery colors and whether the baby would like butterflies as much as they did. Can we call Grandma Betty and tell her? Destiny asked between bites of pancakes. Of course we can, Kira said. She's going to be so excited to have another grandbaby to spoil. What about Grandpa Jonathan and Grandma Helen? Sophie added. Jonathan's parents had embraced Kira and Destiny completely, and the girls loved their quarterly visits to Florida. We'll call them too, Jonathan promised. As Kira watched her family around the breakfast table, her husband and her daughters and the baby growing inside her, she felt a profound sense of completion. Not because their life was perfect, but because it was real and full of love and built on a foundation of choosing each other every single day. The security guards still patrolled the grounds, but now they were more of a precaution than a necessity. The girls attended regular school and participated in community activities. Kira had started teaching first aid classes at the local community center, finding ways to use her nursing skills to help other families. They'd found a balance between Jonathan's world of wealth and privilege and Kira's world of service and community. More importantly, they'd created their own world, one where love mattered more than money, where family was defined by choice rather than blood, and where every day brought new opportunities to be grateful for what they'd built together. "Daddy," Sophie said suddenly, "when the baby comes, will you tell them the story of how you and Mama Kira met?" "Every child should know their family's love story," Jonathan agreed. "Even the part about Mama Kira punching the bad man?" Destiny asked with admiration. "Especially that part," Kira said, laughing. "Because sometimes the most important thing we can do is stand up for what's right, even when it's scary. Even when it changes everything," Jonathan added, meeting her eyes across the table. "Especially when it changes everything," Kira agreed. As the sun streamed through the breakfast room windows, illuminating the faces of her family, Kira Pierce reflected on the truth that had guided her from that first night: love requires action. Families are built by choice, and sometimes the most beautiful things in life come from the moments when we choose to be brave. She punched first and asked questions later. And it had led her to everything she'd never known she was looking for. Thank you so much for taking this journey with Kira, Jonathan, Sophie, and Destiny. Their story reminds us that love comes in many forms and that sometimes the most profound changes in our lives happen when we choose to act with courage and compassion. I'd love to hear from you. What moment in the story resonated most with you? Do you believe in love at first sight, or do you think Jonathan and Kira's quick courtship was realistic? Have you ever had a moment where a split-second decision changed the course of your life? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your stories and insights make this community so special. With love and gratitude,